Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 202 based on novel. So let's start. Why do we need to run? Fuillio, Yu-He, and the rest had no idea why he'd said that. The black tiger god's ears suddenly rose, and he looked at the sacrificial altar that was still being constructed. Around it, the devil soldiers had heard Qin Mu's shout and looked over with suspicion. The devil general of celestial being realm immediately gave 2 shouts, and sent a few devils to check. They flew over, and one of them opened a black jar. Numerous wasps came flying out, and grew to the size of 2 feet. The black tiger god's ears folded back down again, and he asked in bewilderment, "Run, why these devils aren't difficult for you to deal with?" That general of celestial being realm is slightly trickier, but it's not like he can't fight him at all. Qin Mu's forehead broke out in cold sweat, and he felt the mirror in his hands becoming heavier and heavier. It was like carrying a huge mountain from which Riluo was about to walk out. It's Riluo. He is over at that sacrificial altar. His voice was hoarse. Don't you guys see him? He's striding toward us. Everyone was astonished and hurriedly looked around. Yu-He was puzzled. Where's Riluo? The black tiger god looked around, and his ears flickered as he tried to hear anything, but he still shook his head in the end. There's no sign of Riluo. Are you muddle-headed? Riluo is the commander-in-chief of the devil race. So what would he be doing here instead of overseeing the main camp? The mirror in Qin Mu's hands was incomparably heavy and crashed onto the ground. Didn't you guys see Riluo in the mirror? Just now he walked out from the sacrificial altar, and I saw him in the mirror. Everyone hurriedly looked at the mirror, then shook their heads. Cult Master, there's nothing in the mirror. Are your eyes blurry? The enemies are about to reach us. Prepare to face them. Fuillio hurriedly said. The black tiger god looked at the clear mirror with a solemn face. He couldn't see any Riluo, but he sensed that something was wrong. Qin Mu's strength might not be comparable to that of Yu-He, Fuillio, and Sanghua, but it wasn't to the extent that he couldn't hold on to a mirror. Its fall to the ground meant that it had grown too heavy, surpassing the limits of Qin Mu's strength. This was something that was impossible. The black tiger god walked toward the mirror and said solemnly, "There are really no signs of Riluo beside the altar." Did you really see him in the mirror? Qin Mu's eyes were still staring at that mirror, as if he couldn't shift his gaze away. Beads of cold sweat rolled down his forehead. Even though the mirror had dropped on the ground, it hadn't shattered. It stood upright in front of him as though an indescribable force held it there. The black tiger god looked into the mirror, but there was still no Riluo inside, only Qin Mu's reflection. The black tiger god's heart trembled, and he hurriedly went to the other side and looked into Qin Mu's eyes. The youth was still staring at the mirror and with terror. In each of his eyes, there was a figure that was gradually growing bigger and bigger, filling his pupils. In a bit, the black tiger god saw the appearance of that figure which had 3 faces. It was none other than the true devil commander of the devil race, Riluo. Crap! Riluo isn't in the mirror, but in your eyes. You crossed gazes with him before. The black tiger god's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly moved to smash the mirror. With the other hand, he grabbed Qin Mu. Don't look at the mirror. He's borrowing your eyes and the reflection in the mirror to show himself. At this moment, a pair of black hands suddenly popped out from the mirror in front of Qin Mu and grabbed his shoulders. The youth instantly turned into a paper man, and was dragged into the mirror. The black tiger god had wanted to shatter the mirror, but stopped himself. He looked at his hand that was holding on to thin air. He hurriedly turned the mirror around, but it was empty. Only the pair of black hands and Qin Mu were rapidly moving away, becoming smaller and smaller. The black tiger god jumped toward the mirror, but just as he was about to enter, he heard a loud noise. The mirror had been shattered by him. The black tiger god climbed up in a daze. Yu He, Shu Yao, and the rest had been readying to face the enemies, but now they were too stunned by what had just happened. Yet they didn't have the time to think and had to fight their enemy. Riluo had long wanted to seize junior brother. In Li City, he crossed gazes with junior brother Qin and planted the divine art of the devil path in his eyes. Cold sweat started rolling down the black tiger god's forehead. Riluo's divine art of the devil path had to hide from terrifying existences, like Saint Woodcutter, and true god Pang Yu, so it should have had no power. This meaning that Riluo had only imprinted his shadow in the depths of Qin Mu's eyes. This shadow didn't have any power, since it was the only way to hide it from the gods like Saint Woodcutter. Only when Qin Mu stepped into the territory of the devils and absorbed devil chi would the shadow gain strength. It would grow, but it would still not be enough to capture the youth. That was because the shadow was only an imprint in Qin Mu's eyes, and Riluo's body within it was reversed. It was flipped horizontally when compared to the Riluo in the real world, and that included his 5 viscera and 6 bowels, the imprint of the divine arts, and even the smallest atom in his body. Only when Qin Mu raised a mirror and looked at it that Riluo in his eyes righted itself. He was then able to execute his divine arts and kidnap Qin Mu. The moment the youth entered the devil's territory and raised a mirror, he had activated Riluo's divine art. If only I had realized it earlier. The sweat rolled down like rain over the tiger god's forehead, and his eyelids were like 2 water screens. It isn't junior brother Qin that created trouble this time, but me. Now that I've lost junior brother Qin, how am I supposed to answer to my lord? I am finished. Qin Mu looked around his new surroundings. He had appeared in a place that was desolate beyond imagination. There were several huge planets in the sky, but they were tattered, desolate, and lonely. He was located in a huge swamp, standing on water. Flames floated in the distance, burning above the swamp's ground layer. He didn't know where he was, but devil chi was lingering everywhere like fog. Riluo. Qin Mu shouted. You are a senior that has captured me, so why aren't you showing yourself? There was no sound in the surroundings, as if he was the only living being around. Qin Mu frowned and walked forward. A crisp sound rang out under his feet, and he lowered his head to look. He had stepped on a rotting corpse. From the clothing and body size, it should have been a devil that had died quite some time ago. Somewhat stunned, Qin Mu looked at the swamp around himself. There were corpses floating everywhere, and they were all of the devils. There was no end to them, and they were even piled up in hills. Devil fire burned, burning them as well as pieces of wood and straw huts. The latter probably came from collapsed houses. There was no sun in the sky, only the broken planets. Suddenly, fire snakes streaked through the air. Hundreds of them swarmed down. They were fragments of the broken planets the size of mountains fell straight at him. Qin Mu wanted to dodge, but it was too late. Boom. Loud explosions rang out as terrifying flames pounced at his face like huge waves sweeping over with incomparably terrifying tornadoes, swallowing him up. Qin Mu stood in the flames and the tornadoes, but he was not hurt at all. The terrifying waves washed over him again and again, but when they reached his body, they were stopped by a strange power. The corpses in the swamp, however, had no such protection. They disintegrated in the devastating collision. The warped bodies turned into ashes and were blown away by the wind. The swamp dried up in an instant, but before Qin Mu could even come back to his senses, he went into a daze. A broken planet had moved above his head and raised a terrifying tsunami. Thunder-like explosions rang out in the sky, and a wave that was even higher than Mount Meru crashed toward him. The ground split open, and volcanoes rose up. They erupted and spewed out pillars of magma that connected heaven and earth. Lightning flashed in the sky, and Qin Mu saw thousands of volcanoes and flaming pillars getting swept away by a huge wave. Even thunder and lightning were swallowed. The huge wave came crashing over, and it was a mighty force of heaven and earth that he could not defend against. Qin Mu stood still and awaited his fate, but when the terrifying wave reached him, it was once again blocked by a strange power which tore it apart. He wasn't injured at all. The planet in the sky shifted back, and everything returned back to normal. Another vast swamp was formed, and who knew from where, broken bodies floated on the water surface once again. Strange place. Qin Mu composed himself and walked forward. He knew that he had been taken away by Riluo, but the devil god hadn't killed him. Instead, he'd thrown him into this place. He had to be planning something. The youth's speed was extremely fast, and he walked forward faster than he had never done before. During the journey, he experienced the terrifying meteorological phenomenon a few more times. There were floods, earthquakes, thunderstorms, volcanoes, fragments of planets recklessly destroying the world. Respectable king. Suddenly, a devil god descended from the sky and bowed. Respectable king, the sacrificial altar is built. Please give your command. Qin Mu was astonished by the devil god being extremely respectful to him. He didn't seem able to see that he was a human. Okay, Qin Mu replied vaguely. Lead the way. The devil god did so, and not long later, they came to a huge community of cities. There were thousands of sacrificial altars that were like golden pyramids. Devil gods stood upright on them while countless devils knelt at the bottom of the stone steps, waiting to be sacrificed. Respectable king, our world can't last much longer. Please give your command. The devil gods looked at him with fervent gazes, and Qin Mu nodded in a daze. The countless devils kneeling on the stone steps raised their knives and cut their throats. Fresh blood instantly poured over the sacrificial altar. Resounding voices rang out, speaking in the devil language. Qin Mu had learned it before and could understand what everyone was saying. They were sacrificing and worshipping themselves to find a way for the later generations to survive. Their world was about to be destroyed, and they needed a new one to live in. The towering pyramids became incomparably bright, as pillars of light rushed into the sky and split it apart. They tore open the barrier of their world and another one, burning through the sky like a thin membrane. It was shedding irregularly, and the other world gradually showed its true appearance. Qin Mu raised his head to look and saw that it was Supreme Emperor Heaven. He lowered his head and looked at the water beneath his feet. In it, he could the reflection of his face. The water showed 3 faces and sharp ears behind his head. He was the ruler of this world about to die, the respectable king of the devil race, Riluo. Qin Mu raised his head and watched the incomparably magnificent yet sorrowful sight, which was like a painting turning yellow and burning up. The illusion was fading away. Riluo walked toward him while bathed in flames. The sky was like a burning scroll with Riluo at the center. The places that were touched by the flames turned into ashes, and soon half of the land was burned. When everything to the top of Qin Mu's head was burned, the sky was cleaned out. The devil world disappeared and another world appeared in his eyes. Qin Mu didn't look at Riluo, who was walking over, but around himself. Pitch black tall towers stood up ahead like a forest in the grey fog. Numerous devils were akin to hard-working ants hurrying to and fro, forging huge machines to attack the city. There were also some devils practicing to fight. Only when Qin Mu saw the dim and broken sun hanging in the east did he let out a sigh of relief. He was still in Supreme Emperor Heaven. The devil world that Riluo had shown him was simply terrifying. He really didn't want to stay in that place of destruction. The son of Supreme Emperor Heaven was God-forged, and its light wasn't intense, unable to get rid of the devil Qi in the devil's territory. The little light that shone onto Qin Mu's body was also cold, not warming him up in the least. The world that Fuillio had shown him had been merely an illusion. Senior Fuillio shouldn't have spent so much effort to kidnap me just to show the bitter history of his people. Qin Mu looked away and said solemnly, "You guys should know that your bitter history has nothing to do with me. However, you had invaded Supreme Emperor Heaven and pushed the bitterness onto the human race. Now that has something to do with me." Fuillio came to his side and said slowly, "Is little friend Qin so sure that is a human?" Qin Mu's gaze flickered. What is Fuillio trying to say? Why don't you make yourself clear? You are a devil. One of Fuillio's faces looked straight at him and spoke. Furthermore, you are a devil of extremely high quality. Your bloodline might even be higher than mine. Qin Mu was stunned and pointed at the devil with a chortle. He laughed until he couldn't catch his breath. Fuillio didn't say anything, and just waited for him to finish laughing. When he could laugh no longer, he slowly said, "Has no one ever told you that you are a devil?" Qin Mu straightened his back and exhaled deeply. He said with a smile, "Someone had indeed said that before. When I was young, I had met a devil god sealed in Doom Suppression Palace that told me I was a devil. However, he said that to trick me, wanting to steal my body to break free of the seal. So what does Senior Fuillio want from me?" Fuillio walked forward, and his neck turned. The back of his head shifted to his left side and he said, "I'm not trying to trick you. Even though half of what we devils say is fake, the other half is true. When that devil god wanted to seize your body, he told you that you are a devil to gain your trust. It had been the truth." Qin Mu suddenly melted, and his body became a black shadow that moved over the ground. His speed was extremely fast, and he sprinted 100 miles in a flash. Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief and walked out from the black shadow state. He then heard Fuillio's voice. "You might not believe it, but don't you feel your vital qi flowing smoothly when you execute the mudra of the devils, without any obstruction at all?" Qin Mu was stunned. When he looked around, he saw that he was not far from Fuillio. It was just that now he was on the left instead of behind. For you to be able to learn the divine arts of the devil race so easily and execute them without obstruction, there's only one explanation: you're also a devil. Fuillio said with a smile. Qin Mu rose into the sky and executed heaven-pilfering divine legs to the limits, and broke through the air. After a moment, he saw Fuillio in front of him, and his expression couldn't help changing drastically. He hurriedly turned around and sprinted away. After a moment, he found himself returning back, sprinting on the right of Fuillio. Qin Mu paused and fell from the sky, sinking into the ground. When he moved quite a distance underground, he popped his head out to see that he was behind Fuillio. He was still near the towers, and Fuillio was walking at a steady pace. "However, you're also human, so you're skilled in cultivating the divine arts of the human race as well." Fuillio's voice came from the front. "You're half human and half devil, so you are able to easily master the divine arts of the two races. I pity a talent like you, which is why I invited you here." Qin Mu patted the dirt on his clothes and sneered. "Respectable king, your method of inviting someone is quite unique." He stopped trying to escape and followed after Fuillio. When the devil heard that he no longer called him senior, but changed to respectable king, one of his faces smiled. The two names might have looked unintentional, but they were actually well thought out. Calling the other a senior was to let the other party know that he was a junior, and a senior laying hands on a junior's life was disgraceful. The title of respectable king was also a thought-out response. It was how the devils addressed Fuillio, and Qin Mu was placing himself on the level of a devil to lower Fuilio's guard. Of course, these kind of small tricks were of no use against Fuillio. The devils aren't like those of humans who have vast and rich lands, blessed by heaven. We devils are from Yudu. Fuillio signaled for him to follow and began speaking. There were so many damned souls in Yudu that their grievances and devil nature gave birth to the ancestors of the devil race. They were the devil gods that carried evil thoughts from heaven and earth, giving birth to the devils when they reproduced with one another. Qin Mu was slightly stunned, not understanding why he was being told all that. After the devils were born, they weren't viewed highly by Yudu, and got chased out by Earth Count. That's why my devils were vagrants from the moment we were born and were forced to find a place to settle themselves. We were not welcomed by the other races, so the places we could pick were usually treacherous. However, even like that, we still survived. Yet. His other face turned around and said, yet our world sank from destruction, and for the survival of our race, we had no choice but to invade Supreme Emperor Heaven. Actually, the reason I've come to find you is to find a method for humans and devils to live together. When I first saw you, a thought took root in my mind. Fuillio's face was incredibly sincere, and he suggested a very tempting idea. If you could help me unite Supreme Emperor Heaven, I would let you rule the humans. Like that, the humans would be safe under your rule while the devils would be safe under my rule. Isn't this the best of both worlds? His gaze was full of vigor when it landed on Qin Mu, anticipating his reply. Qin Mu thought for a moment, then probed, "Respectable king, it is only half of what a devil says is true. Now, I would like to ask, which are the truths and which are the lies in the sentences the respectable king just said?" Fuillio turned his neck and changed his face. This one was gloomy and said indifferently, "What do you think?" Qin Mu smiled. "Respectable king's suggestion is very good. Why don't we do as what you've said?" Fuillio was stunned, but Qin Mu continued, "Supreme Emperor Heaven will be separated into two, and I will rule the human race while you will rule the devil race, and everyone will live peacefully. Respectable king, you can now hand all of the humans in your devil territory to me." Fuillio's gloomy face stared straight at him, then there were two cracks. His neck slowly rotated around, and his third face appeared. It was green-skinned and had ferocious fangs. It looked both malicious and terrifying. Qin Mu exhaled and said with a smile, "Now I know how many of Respectable King's words are true and how many false. Respectable King, your aim isn't Supreme Emperor Heaven, but Great Ruins. This place is just a springboard for you. If I help you swallow Supreme Emperor Heaven, you will sacrifice it to enter Great Ruins." Fuillio gave a cold snort and brought him forward to the front of a broken cliff with a malicious expression. "Didn't my disciple Fu Yuxiao die in your hands? I can put away this grudge and give you luxury, but you treat me like an idiot. Do you think Heavenly Teacher can stop me? Do you think those gods of yours can stop me?" Qin Mu walked up a few steps and looked down. His expression changed drastically. In front of him was an abyss in which countless devils and humans were busy sculpting huge and majestic altars. There were about a few hundred of them. When Saint Woodcutter had summoned his friends, 24 stone statues had descended from Great Ruins. They had revived and become gods. Their 24 pyramid altars had looked quite magnificent in a line. Yet now, below him were much more than 24 sacrificial altars. There were a few hundred of them, and they were all going to summon devil gods. The corner of Qin Mu's eyes trembled, and he said in a hoarse voice, "It's impossible for you to summon so many gods and devils. Even if the celestial heavens assist you, they wouldn't give you that much power. You also wouldn't dare to accept such a huge army of gods and devils." Fuillio shook his head. "I can invite the gods and devils of the celestial heavens down to the lower bound, but I indeed don't dare to do that. Cold sweat rolled down Qin Mu's forehead, and he immediately shook his head. That world of yours has long been connected to Supreme Emperor Heaven, so there aren't any more devil gods. If there were, they could come in directly. With the war ongoing for 20,000 years, many of your devil gods must have died in battle. There aren't many left, so there's no need for so many sacrificial altars. Fuillio looked at him coldly. Continue to guess. I'll give you a way to survive if you guess correctly. Qin Mu's heart shook violently, and he gripped his hands. He instantly knew what Fuillio was planning to summon. The ancestors of the devils, the devil gods born from the devil nature, grievances, and evil thoughts of Yudu. You're planning to summon those things. Fuillio laughed loudly and looked rather pleased. What do you think about this idea? Qin Mu composed himself and shook his head. Respectable king has also come to a dead end, to even consider summoning them. With the characteristics of those devil gods, it wouldn't end with just the elimination of the human race. The whole Supreme Emperor Heaven would be destroyed. That's why we are sacrificing Supreme Emperor Heaven. Fuillio smiled, and the three faces spoke in unison. We're going to turn Supreme Emperor Heaven into the stepping stone to enter great ruins. However, I have an even better idea. I've heard you constructed a spirit energy mutual shift bridge. If you forge a few bridges like that for my people, I could spare your life. Respectable king would dare to let me build bridges for his devils. Aren't you afraid of me tampering with THM? Qin Mu asked. Fuillio's expression changed slightly, and he said coldly, So you are fixated on rejecting me? Senior, Qin Mu hurriedly said. Fuillio swept his sleeves up and sneered. Stop trying to act smart. There's no use in calling me senior. I've treated you sincerely and think highly of your outstanding talent. Even Heavenly Teacher couldn't come up with such a thing like spirit energy mutual shift bridge. But you did, so I pitied your talent and let you live this long. Do you really think I won't kill you? When had my devils lost their reputation? His fierce aura erupted, and Qin Mu's expression changed drastically. He couldn't breathe from the pressure, and hurriedly took a few steps back. With the last breath in his chest, he shouted, Actually, I'm from Carefree Village. Fuillio was about to kill him, but stopped when he heard what he had said. You're from Carefree Village. What proof do you have? Qin Mu's face was flushed, and he couldn't catch his breath. Fuillio pulled his devil aura back, and Qin Mu gasped for breath. He took out the jade pendant and said, I have the token of Carefree Village as proof. Respectable king, you should recognize it, right? Fuillio stretched his hand out, and the jade pendant broke free from Qin Mu's grasp, flying into his hands. Qin Mu's heart beat furiously, but he suppressed it, forcing his heart rate to go back to normal. King Yama said I can't let the jade pendant leave my side, or bad things will happen. Now I can only rely on this to escape. I hope it works. How come the bad things aren't happening yet? Could I be too close to the jade pendant? Qin Mu blinked and secretly moved back 2 steps, but there were still no bad things happening. He moved back another 2 steps, but everything was still normal. This jade pendant. It is indeed a jade pendant from Carefree Village. Fuillio examined it over and over again. His faces were flickering between clear and dark while muttering to one another. That's not right, he is lying to us. How can a person from Carefree Village be half human and half devil? He is definitely lying to us. This brat is very crafty. He may look honest, but is actually very scheming. You can't believe his words. However, this is indeed a jade pendant of Carefree Village. If we caught a person of Carefree Village and found that place through him, the celestial heavens would definitely reward us handsomely after we report it to them. They would then certainly give a place for the devils to live peacefully. We can't trust the celestial heavens. Pigs are more likely to fly than them being reliable. Qin Mu secretly moved back a few more steps, while the three faces of Riluo were quarreling. He suddenly turned around and ran, but the next instant, he saw Riluo before him. Riluo was still standing on the same spot from which he hadn't moved an inch. The three faces were still quarreling, and Qin Mu couldn't help falling into despair. Riluo was too strong, so strong that he could distort space and prevent those weaker than him from escaping. Qin Mu couldn't even step away from the jade pendant. Carefree Village is very mysterious. It had established a great civilization and large celestial heavens. However, how could Carefree Village have a devil descendant? That's very suspicious. That's right, it's very suspicious. I think we should kill this brat. Let's kill him now. Wait a minute, this jade pendant is weird. There's a seal hidden inside. What is it for? Could it be hiding the secrets of Carefree Village? Qin Mu stared dumbfoundedly at the three faces of Riluo. There were actually three different consciousness in Riluo's body, and they were like three different souls. At this moment, they were fighting each other to see who can finish studying the jade pendant first and unravel the secret of its seal. Qin Mu stood obediently and didn't move. Since he couldn't leave, he decided to be as obedient and honest as possible. At that moment, he heard voices, some familiar whispers. They were no strangers to him, as he had heard them when King Yama had played with his jade pendant in Fuillio. They were very noisy. It sounded as though countless spirits were hiding in the dark and speaking alluring words with distorted and strange expressions in an attempt to lure him in. Qin Mu shook his head, but the whispers came closer and closer, as though their owners were sprawled beside his ears and speaking straight into them. He raised his hand to wave them away, but he couldn't touch nor feel those voices in the real world. The next instant, he felt as though the voices entered his mind. The sound was simply too loud, nearly splitting his mind apart. Qin Mu tilted his head to the right, and patted his left ear, as if he wanted to shake the voices out from his mind. However, they grew louder and louder before suddenly overlapping. His head lowered, and he froze. His body swayed back and forth, his arms hanging weakly beside him. The seal is almost suppressed by us. This thing definitely has some secret. Maybe it can let us discover the marvel of Carefree Village. Riluo's three faces were still chatting incessantly when a voice suddenly rang out from the side. Smash it! Riluo turned his head around and looked at the source of that voice. He saw Qin Mu with his head lowered just standing there. His body swayed back and forth. Bewildered, Riluo asked with a smile, "What did you say?" An incomparably evil voice came from Qin Mu's mouth as he chuckled. "I'm telling you to smash it. Something interesting will happen then. Quick, smash it." Riluo's three faces frowned. The extent of evil in the voice made him shudder not from the cold. He was the respectable king, who was incomparably evil, so it should have been close to impossible to make him find someone else evil or shudder without feeling cold. "Why aren't you making your move?" Behind Qin Mu, space suddenly cracked open. With a hum, a huge evil eye opened up, and butterfly wing-shaped devil light burst forth from it. The space in the surroundings cracked from the vibrations and looked ready to shatter at any moment. The devil light filled the cracks, creating an extremely bewitching and evil sight. Pitiful little things, what a lowly and weak bloodline. Qin Mu's voice became more and more evil as it floated around. He was clearly standing in one place, yet he gave Riluo a feeling that he was present everywhere. The devil god frowned. In Qin Mu's manner of speech, he had become a pitiful thing, someone from a race with lowly and weak bloodline. He couldn't accept that. However, He felt a hint of danger and fear bloomed in his heart, but there was even more excitement in his heart. Is this the secret of your jade pendant? The secret of Carefree Village? Behind Qin Mu, a second crack in space opened up, and another strange devil eye showed up. The space cracked open again, and devil light poured out from all directions. Incomparably weak and little existence, lowly and pitiful worm, how dare you not listen to my command? Qin Mu smiled with his head still lowered. Shh, you're seeking death, eh? How should I kill you to make it interesting? Riluo's mind went blank when he saw the third eye. It was located slightly above the first two eyes, right in the center between them. This eye seemed to contain boundless devil fire, but when it wanted to open, it was unable to do so. Only a tiny gap could be seen, but even so, the power of the devil fire hidden inside it made people shudder not from the cold. Riluo slowly raised his head, and looked at the three evil devil eyes that were rising slowly. In a few moments, he saw a majestic devil god that was blazing with the devil fire of Yudu. He was looking down on Riluo from high above. The devil god lowered his head with difficulty, and looked at Qin Mu. His other two faces were trying their best to rotate their eyeballs and to see what exactly was happening around him. This is impossible, this is definitely impossible. Riluo's throat went dry, and he spoke to himself in a hoarse voice. It's impossible for your body to have such a powerful primordial spirit of a primordial devil. This isn't logical. Destroy the jade pendant for me. Qin Mu suddenly raised his head up, and his pupils were completely black. Black devil fire burst forth from them like butterfly wings, and his terrifying words used frightening devil voice to assault its target. Riluo felt violent wind hit him in the face, and his clothes fluttered backward. Wrinkles formed on his face from the vibrations, accumulating together. In his surroundings, sand and rocks flew from the violent devil voice that had formed a black storm. He narrowed his eyes and took a good look around. There was also an eye at the heart of Qin Mu's brows, but it hadn't opened yet. There was only a small gap at the bottom. This is. You were born in Yudu. Riluo instantly came to realization and screeched. You? Boom. A huge fist crashed against his body, and Riluo coughed up blood. The surrounding space crackled, and majestic mountains passed by him in a flash. In the next instant, his body fell into the abyss and crashed into an altar in the middle of construction. It crumbled on the spot, and rocks flew in all directions. Riluo couldn't help becoming furious, and 3 growls escaped his mouths. His body began growing once he stopped restraining it. His muscles expanded outward, and he stretched out his hand to grab the devil spear. He was about to soar into the sky when the world suddenly turned dim. This video will end here.